So in English language, we basically have two verb voices. We basically have two verb voices, active voice and the passive voice. And the difference between the active voice and the passive voice is of the relationship between the subject, and the verb in context of the physical or the mental action that is being discussed in the sentence. So in active voice, when we write a sentence or say a sentence in an active voice, we have a physical or a mental action that the subject is directly performing in the sentence. For example, Abdullah is running in the park. In this sentence, what is the identifiable physical action that is being discussed? The action is running. And who is performing that action? Abdullah is performing that action. And the relationship between the subject and the action is direct. The subject, the noun or the noun phrase that is the part of the subject performs the action that is happening in the sentence. The subject in active voice is the doer of the action, whether physical or mental, that is taking place. Another example is Arham has been writing a news article for his employer. Again, what is the action? Writing. And who is writing? Arham. So there is a direct relationship between the subject and the physical action of the sentence. On the other hand, when we move into passive voice, the subject does not perform the action, and the subject is not the doer in the sentence. And the reason why that happens is because what you have to recognize is that the relationship in a sentence is always between the subject and the verb. The relationship is not between the subject and the action word. Now, what happens more often than not is that the verb is an action word. And what we have internalized over 16, 17 years of education is the fact that verb is an action word. But we have already discussed the fact that it is not necessarily the case, that verb is not always an action word. And the reason that in a passive voice sentence, the subject does not perform the action is that in a passive voice sentence, the verb does not indicate a physical action. The physical action that is being discussed in the sentence is not part of the verb. And let's look at an example. Amin was driven to school by his father. What is the physical action? The physical action is driving, right? The physical action in this sentence is driving. What is the action that is being performed? Driving is the action that is being performed. But in the verb, and the verb is was driven, this physical action is not being performed. The verb is was driven. The verb is not was driving or drove. The verb is was driven. And because the relationship in a sentence must be between the subject and the verb, the subject in this sentence cannot be the person who is performing the physical action. The subject in this sentence, in this passive voice sentence, will be the noun or the noun phrase that corresponds with our verb. And the noun or noun phrase that corresponds with our verb here is Amin, because it was Amin who was driven to school. It was Amin who was driven to school. Yes, it was not Amin who drove, but the verb does not indicate the action drove or driving. The verb indicates what actually happened. And therefore, in this sentence, to maintain the relationship between the subject and the verb, our subject will not be the noun or the noun phrase that performs the action, but the noun or the noun phrase that corresponds with the verb. And that is basically the difference between the active voice and the passive voice. Now let's take a step back and transform this passive voice sentence into an active voice sentence. Now, what do we do to make this passive voice sentence into an active voice sentence? What we basically do is basically replace the verb with the action word. So in our example, our verb was driven, which did not comprise of the actual physical action taking place. But when we transform this sentence into active voice, what we'll basically do is we'll basically replace this verb with a verb that indicates that physical action. And the active voice sentence would be his father drove Amin to school. And now, because the verb indicates the physical action, the subject will be the noun or the noun phrase that performs that action. And the noun phrase that performs that action is his father. It is his father who drove Amin to school. And therefore, it is his father who will be the subject in our active voice form of this sentence.